Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum
Doobie doobie da da da. 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 Ba-da-da, 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 ba-ba-ba. Doobie-doobie-da-da-da.
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
And I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. In this episode, we are now experienced, legitimate award show hosts.
Oh.
The Harveys has seasoned us. The stage is set in our love nest. We're dressed to the nines. We're going for a sophisticated, candlelit evening with comics.
Am I being hit with a plume of scent? Is that the candles, Lisa?
Nothing says sophistication like a symphony of mismatched scented candles, and they're all inspired by 2024 comics. This one is Woodbrook Christmas Market. And these two are Home Sweet Gotham, and this one is Home Sweet Absolute Gotham. Smell them both.
Yeah, they're definitely different.
The second one has more of a dark side.
And this one, what is that?
Ooh, that's Godzilla's Breath Spritz. It's the 2024 Stampies Part 1.
We made it. 2024 is coming to a close, and it's time to celebrate. We have been doing this podcast now for 6 years, and this best of show we've been doing for 5 years, but it's only been called the Stampies for the last 2 years.
Man, that is a word problem, and I'm not here to solve anything.
Like any award show, it's completely arbitrary, right? Like, art is subjective. Brad and Lisa, we're a couple of weirdos, so you got to take all of our awards, all of our Stampies with a grain of salt, right?
Right. We have no merit. We have no authority. We just want to talk about books that we really, really loved.
And I know we say this every year, but 2024 really was an astonishing one for comics.
We are living in a golden age.
It was really difficult to narrow down our favorites into just 2 episodes of the Stampies, which is why we brought on a bevy of guest stars to help us this year. And what I'm really excited about is that not only do we have the usual podcasters and journalists, but this year we also invited retailers and comic book creators to partake. This is the award show that I always imagined it to be. It is definitely inspired by the Film Spotting podcast. At the end of the year, they always do a top 10, but in between their selections, they bring on like Ryan Johnson to name his favorite movie of the year.
It's just a beautiful way to emphasize that we are celebrating every single comic that has been made, including the ones that we or our guests have not mentioned. And it was really thrilling sending out the invitations for yet another Stampy. We reached for some people that we really love and respect and admire. And to get some yeses that we didn't expect has been really, really cool. So if you want to be spoiled about who's going to be on this particular episode, check out the show notes and then definitely follow each and every one of these people because they're super freaking cool.
We talk about this all of the time, but there really is no community like the comic book community. The veil between artist and reader is so thin. Communication between the two is actually pretty easy, and any reader at any time can become a creator. And I think that is something that we have been, playing around with.
We've been dabbling.
Yeah, we've been dabbling this year, and that's super exciting.
And the longer we've been part of the comics community and the more mindful we've been for establishing and tending these connections that become friendships and relationships and collaborators, like the way I see it in my mind is these connections we make to other people act as scaffolding to bolster us. And we just hope that it does the same for you.
All we have is each other, and it's an extremely tumultuous time out there. And we have found safety in comics and those that read them and those that want to talk about them.
Not just safety, but also activation. Art is a way to find like-minded people. We know that if you like the comics we like, we probably have even more in common.
Yeah, we can rally around them.
Yeah.
Toward the end of this year, we updated our logo. It's now illustrated by Jesse Lonergan with lettering from Hassan Atsman Elhau.
Still unbelievable.
And our new slogan is based off of the classic Jack Kirby quote, comics will break your heart. And we've updated it a little bit to say, comics will mend your heart. And that's the energy that we are taking into 2025. We really do believe that these stories that we wrap ourselves in, they can help us survive.
That Jack Kirby quote about comics breaking his heart, my heart breaks too when I think about how Jack Kirby was treated by the comics industry. But what made Jack Kirby's heart able to be broken in the first place was he was coming from this place of deep caring for the medium. And now updating that idea and saying comics can mend your heart. The comics industry has it in them to do better. Comics readers have it in them to make sure our creators are being well compensated, well celebrated, and this kind of ecosystem of caring will just make better people and better books.
Yeah, and also making sure that the comics readers are being seen by that industry too.
That's right, seen and loved.
The other thing we know about these Stampies episodes is that they are two of our most popular episodes of the year. So we know that we're getting new listeners right now, and you're experiencing the cornball nature of Brad and Lisa. And for that, we do not apologize.
Oh, no.
We just welcome you.
And so, with some further ado, we will actually get into the awards show portion. But, of course, we have some caveats. We have some fine print. So, sit tight. I'll get through them quickly. Caveat number 1. This is a Brad and Lisa list, meaning that the winners of each category have been read and agreed upon by Brad and Lisa. Our Venn diagram of the things that we like is not a perfect circle.
That is true.
So, yeah, just have that in the back of your mind.
No blood on the tracks this episode.
Caveat number 2, Brad and Lisa have not read the totality of everything that came out in 2024. I'm sure we're not even actually close.
Which, again, is why it's really cool to have the guest stars that we do on these 2 episodes.
Caveat number 3, which we touched on at the beginning of this episode, but it bears repeating. The Stampies are arbitrary and have no merit. Example, in some cases, we pick the book that we want to talk about and then pick the category. It's not like we sit there and go okay, now we have to fulfill this category. Yeah. We go we want to talk about
this.
The
categories change every year.
Yeah. Caveat number 4, we excluded books that may have been collected this year or finished this year, but we've already honored them with a Stampy last year, so we're not going to mention them again. A great example of this is the collected Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. Clearly, that collection is one of the best books of 2024, but we already talked about it, and you can go back and listen to that episode.
And like last year, at the end of this year, we are going to publish on our website the 50 best comics of 2024, and you will find Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees on that list.
And then our final caveat, which also covers what you just said, is that we loved many more books than this. So go ahead and hover your cursor over www.comicbookcouplescounseling.com because that list will be coming out.
So there you go. With the fine print now read, let's get on with the ceremony. And to help us introduce the first category, we have Eric Jones, manager of Four Color Fantasies in Winchester, Virginia.
It's Eric from Four Color Fantasies. I was asked to pick a couple of my favorites from this year. and that was very hard because this was a very, very good year for comics. But I tried to narrow it down to 3 from different genres or areas of the comics world. So I picked a big 2, an indie, quote unquote, and then maybe a non-traditional comic with non-traditional ways to get it. Big 2, I got to go with Absolute Batman #1. Really, I could cheat and say the All-In initiative in general, because that has just made me so excited for comics again. It makes me feel like a kid getting into comics again. But Absolute Batman just defied all of my expectations. We took a big chance on it and sold 3 times as many as the regular Batman book with that #1, and the people are still coming back for #2. We're getting new readers from it, younger kids coming in asking for it, which always excites me to have younger readers coming in. Just exciting, really fun comic. My second pick would be Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees from Patrick Horvath and IDW. Just a fun, weird book, beautiful art, completely kind of took everybody by surprise. And even sales were increasing for us even by issue 3 and 4, which is always awesome to see. Just a really cool book, and I think it's going to be a perennial seller on the shelf. And last, I would say for my non-traditional comic, I got to say Witchman by Tom Scioli. It was a Kickstarter book, and Witchman just felt like a comic I would have found at a flea market as a kid and not known anything about it, but loved every page of it. And I want 100 more issues of Witchman. It's just good classic comics, and I loved it. So those are my 3 if I had to pick them, and I'm excited to hear what everyone else picked. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for kicking things off. I loved your approach. I love hearing how Absolute Batman is bringing old readers and new readers into the store. And I love hearing a little love for Witchman, Tom Scioli's Watchmen satire.
Tom Scioli is a creator with funny in his bones.
Yeah, and we're going to be hearing his name multiple times throughout the Stampies. He's having a lot of fun with comics. And if you're listening to this and you're anywhere near the Winchester, Virginia area, please make sure that you visit 4-Color Fantasies. They co-sponsor all the film club screenings at the Alamo Drafthouse that we do, and they're an Eisner-nominated shop and just one of the best shops around.
Mike and Eric run 4-Color Fantasies with so much love. And speaking of love, our first category is Best Comic Book Couple. This is our 2nd year running with this category. Last year, it went to Gabby and Trudy from I Hate This Place. And I'm so excited for our winners this year.
Yeah, this is a comic that we have been anticipating for at least 2 years. It was originally supposed to publish in 2023, but then there was a book scheduling conflict, so it didn't happen then. But I'm so grateful that it happened now. Of course, we are talking about Hogbook and Laser Eyes by Scott Marble Cassidy and Maria Bamford, and published by Fantagraphics.
Yes. Maria and Scott are a married couple, and Hogbook and Laser Eyes is the memoir of their love story, but told from the perspective of their series of geriatric pug rescues.
Yeah, and it is a series because they're geriatric pugs, they do continually die throughout this story. So you do have to get used to dog death in this love tale.
But it is such a beautiful reminder that grief is part of the gamble of loving. Like when you love something, you love someone, you love a dog or a book, you always run the risk of it breaking your heart. And what I think is so special about this book is that both Maria Bamford and Scott have a penchant for the absurd.
Yeah.
And the way they bring that skewed perspective to what is a pretty mundane love story really celebrates all love.
Yeah.
That all love is just so beautiful.
The inner lives of these pugs are absolutely wonderful. Bert dreaming of being Michael Flatley. That is a panel that I will carry with me in my heart for a very long time. And I also have to say that this book helped me in the process of writing our first comic, The Vegetable for Pots and Panels, which is coming out next year. And when we sent that script off to Gerald von Stoddard to then translate our story, and it's such a strange experience to finally see yourselves illustrated, and there's an uncanny quality to it. You're like, well, that is kind of like me on the page, but it's not me on the page. But then I take a look at Hogbook and Laser Eyes, and I go, yeah, that's kind of Maria Bamford and Scott Marvel Cassidy, but it's kind of not. And if it's kind of not, if it's kind of uncanny in this book, this masterpiece of storytelling, then it's okay for our illustrated bodies to be a little uncanny in our 8-page story.
Yeah, because both Scott and Gerald accomplish drawing what things feel like versus what things actually look
100%.
like.
100%. And for a variety of reasons, we had to return to this book multiple times throughout the year. And every time I read this book, I just fell deeper in love with their love story. And at some point, Lisa, you connected it to the Infinite All-In
Yes.
that Norrin Rad and Don Greenwood experience in the Dan Slott and Michael Allred Silver Surfer run. And once you made that bridge, like, Hogbook and Laser Eyes became an all-timer for me.
Yeah, another great life lesson I took from Hogbook and Laser Eyes is from that Michael Flatley Bert moment, where it's just like everybody contains within them a vast mystery that they don't even understand. And so I think about Bert all the time.
Yeah. And so we actually got to write about Hogbook and Laser Eyes for the Comics Courier, which was edited by Tiffany Babb. And that's a great way to transition
Ooh,
to
at
our
you.
next guest, who is indeed Tiffany Babb, talking about one of her favorite comics of the year.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Babb. My favorite comic of the year is almost coming to an end. The Deviant by James Tynion and Joshua Hickson and the great Hass Otsman-Elohow is this incredible slow burn Christmas serial killer story about what it means to be a gay kid and have your first exposure to someone else being gay be a serial killer on the news. The book is moody, it has this incredible artwork, stellar pacing, and is super nuanced in a way that I think you kind of have to be if you're tackling this sort of story. I honestly can't wait to see how the comic ends. It has not ended yet. I think it's ending right around Christmas, which is perfect for the Christmas theme. And personally, I think it's the best thing Tynion's ever written. The story is 9 issues, so it's not super, super long. And I just think it's this incredible, special read that I would highly recommend to anyone who's looking for something that's in the monthly realm that is kind of off the beaten path and is trying to say something new and interesting about serial killers. That sounds so bleak, but it's really, really good, and I highly recommend The Deviant.
So this is an example of a book that we have not read, and I want to say shame on us, but no, resist being defensive and embrace the fact that we have a rad comic in our future.
And now that I know that it is a seasonal read, I'm not going to skip it.
Yeah. James Tynion, if this is the best thing that he has ever written, that is saying quite a lot, because he has cranked out some of our favorite comics, and we may mention him later in the show.
And I trust Tiffany's opinion. She is so cool and smart, and I want to be her when I grow up, but my energy is too chaotic.
So we'll just have to settle for being her best friend ever.
Ooh.
So our next category is Best Murder Mystery.
That's right. First ever appearance of this category.
And we had to include this comic because it has inspired an obsessive rewatch of Murder, She Wrote.
We told you, books are activating.
We have gone through 2 seasons of the Angela Lansbury mystery series so far in just the last 30 days. That's practically 1 episode, or no, 2 episodes a day. Because this book really is in that spirit, that cozy murder mystery spirit. and has a character that's a little bit like J.B. Fletcher. The book, of course, that I'm talking about is Guilt Frame from Margie Kraft Kint and Matt Kint, and published by Dark Horse Comics. It was only 3 issues, but they were 3 thick issues jammed with so much information, so much character, so much emotion. It follows an aunt and nephew as they solve crimes throughout the globe, although it centers on one particular crime in France.
As an obsessive note taker, I love mysteries because I love being rewarded for reading carefully and closely.
You like solving crimes before it seems logical to have solved them.
Oh, yeah. And I do it with such flagrant confidence.
And you love throwing it in my face. Like, oh, this is what's happening. And usually you're right.
But Matt and Margie deliver a satisfying ending that I am ashamed to say I did not foresee. But, like, upon thinking back on the clues, I go, like, man, it was right in front of me the whole time.
Yeah, yeah.
And it still accomplishes
And
being sweet and funny.
I do think it, like, we need to talk to them again. But
Yeah.
I feel like this book is directly inspired by Murder, She Wrote. Because, oh gosh, if I say any
Don't
more,
say any
I
more.
will ruin it. But it does the thing that Lisa and I have always wondered about regarding J.B. Fletcher.
Oh, man, you just spoiled it for so many people.
No,
But
I don't
you
think I
should
did.
still read it.
No, I don't think I did. This is a comic that not enough people are talking about in 2024, and it's going to be collected in 2025. And I really do hope that the people who go to Barnes & Noble are going to stumble on this thing. They're going to be in the cozy murder mystery section. They'll find Guilt Frame, and then they will have a whole world of Matt Kint comics opened up to them.
I'm going to entice a few people right now with just one word. Diagrams. I love them. Can't use them in real life, but they're great.
Yeah, and Matt Kint excels with diagrams.
I love a label.
And now, helping us introduce our next category is co-host of the Amazing Spider Talk, Dan Gvozden.
Hey, Brad and Lisa. It's Dan Gvozden from the Amazing Spider Talk podcast here. I'm so excited that you guys invited me back on to talk about some of my favorite comics from the year 2024. You may hear my cat in the background. He's decided to join me for this recording, but either way, if he has a comic he wants to shout out, he's more than welcome to do so. I really wanted to shout out a number of Marvel books that I'm liking. The Marvel line tends to get a lot of crap. I don't mean the books. I mean from people online suggesting that the books aren't particularly good. But as someone that reads every single book that Marvel publishes, I think there's a lot of really amazing gems that are being overlooked. One of the writers who's been working kind of consistently at Marvel that I think has done some stuff that's splashed but really isn't getting enough attention is Steve Orlando. Steve's been doing Scarlet Witch for a while, which I think is a really strong book. But I think the real book that he should be getting a shout out for is his work in the 2099 universe. He didn't have a Spider-Man 2099 series this year, but he did a kind of series of anthology books, one called Annihilation 2099. And I'll admit, I didn't pick this up initially because I didn't know that I wanted to read a big event in the world of 2099. But that's not what this was. This was an anthology series around a bunch of characters in this new 2099 universe that he's established. And Steve Orlando excels at doing one-shot anthology-style series. He kind of did it with his Spider-Man 2099 miniseries over the past couple of years. But to me, this Annihilation 2099 is his best stuff yet. Each issue is some crazy riff on a new 2099 character or a continuation of something he set up earlier, and they're all one-and-dones that are really exciting and kind of bring to mind the best of what anthology series can offer, especially in something like the Marvel Universe or something like 2099, where you can just kind of do crazy stuff and you can either choose to acknowledge it later or everyone else could ignore it. And these are all great, whether we see the characters again or never see them again. We've got a new Nova, a new Silver Surfer. I love them all and thought that this series was a blast. And no compliments about the Marvel line would be complete without shouting out the Ultimates, the new volume of Ultimate books led by writer Dennis Camp and artist Juan Frigeri. I mean, this book is the best book that Marvel is publishing of an ongoing story. It feels modern. It feels like a response to the classic Ultimates book that we got, what was it, almost 20 years ago now? Maybe over 20 years ago. I'm old. I'm dating myself. But this book is the right book at the right time. You know, an issue came out the day after the election about the rise of fascism and the overconfidence of the resistance. And man, it hit me like a truck. And any book that can do that in 2024 coming from the Marvel line and feel this progressive and radical and has so much to say about the world that we live in, I never expected that from an Ultimate book, especially one that's not being led by Jonathan Hickman, who seemed to establish this whole thing. Ultimate Spider-Man is languishing for me, but the Ultimates is the book of the line that I think everyone should be reading. So anyway, those are two books that I really enjoyed, Annihilation 2099 and the new The Ultimates, that I hope people check out if they are ignoring much of the Marvel line. Those ones might really thrill you. As always, I'll continue to read all of the Spider-Man books and cover them on my podcast, The Amazing Spider Talk. And I'm really thrilled that we have a podcast like yours to cover the rest of comics.
Thank you, Dan. Podcasting royalty. And he reads everything that Marvel puts out. That is an example of someone with some authority.
Yeah, I wish I read more Marvel. I've fallen away from them quite a bit in the last year, and I missed both of these series that Dan mentioned, but here's a good reason, a good excuse to get back to those. And we're going to hear more about the Ultimates throughout this episode and next episode from our guests. My comics reading obsession began with Marvel Comics and superheroes, and I'm really excited to introduce another new category into the Stampies this year with Best New Superhero. And boy, there really was no book quite like The Pedestrian this year, written by Joey Esposito and illustrated by Sean Von Gorman. The Pedestrian is about, well, the title, superhero, who patrols the streets and sidewalks of Summer City. And yeah, he just wants to be there for you. You know, if you need to back your car into a parallel spot and you're having a little difficulty, the Pedestrian is there. If you're getting mugged, the Pedestrian is there.
As long as what you need doesn't violate any pedestrian laws, then he is there.
The Pedestrian is also a great ensemble piece. Summer City is a town that is populated with quirky characters. And when we spoke to Sean and Joey at San Diego Comic-Con, we talked about how they were inspired by Twin Peaks. And The Pedestrian definitely does have a David Lynch feel, but I would say it goes even more cosmic as the series progresses, which is saying something because Twin Peaks is pretty darn cosmic.
It's funny because, like, when we had that conversation and they're like, it's Twin Peaks, like, barely any of that is hinted at in the first issue. And then second issue, mind blown.
Yeah, and then you get to the fourth issue and it's like full-on Marvel Eternity action.
I am super stoked for The Pedestrian to be the first comic of this category for us, because I think that The Pedestrian really accomplishes what we actually want from superhero comics, which is to honor the tropes, to honor the genre, but still defy our expectations.
Yeah.
And they are so smart, and what they're doing with The Pedestrian gets me so excited with each subsequent issue. I just want it to go on forever.
Yeah, and so like right now, Magma Comics has published 4 issues, and they're going to be collected in a new trade paperback. And I need everyone listening to this to place an order for that trade paperback, because we definitely do need more issues. I feel like this first arc is self-contained, and if we were cursed to only have these 4 issues, I would be totally satisfied. No, but that's a lie. That's a lie. I wouldn't be satisfied because I want more. I want more for The Pedestrian.
If you've been sleeping on this comic, just read the first issue.
Yeah.
It will sell itself to you.
And
I don't know if they intentionally did this. I suspect that they are brilliant marketing minds.
Well,
but
that's for
you
sure.
will literally on every street corner think about this book.
Yeah.
Every time you see a walk, don't walk sign, you are thinking of this
thing,
book.
right? Like the pedestrian symbol is so iconic, and it is something that we interact with every day as we walk across the street to go to get our groceries. And now when I see that symbol, I mean, it's free advertisement for the pedestrians.
Yes, and it makes that symbol aspirational as opposed to mundane.
It's Pavlovian.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I see that symbol, it's like, oh, I need to read some Joey Esposito and Sean Von Gorman comics.
Yum, yum.
And moving right along to our next category, we have Zach Quaintance to help us. He is one of those comics journalists who has pierced the veil and become a comics creator himself. This year saw the publication of the Death of Comics bookcase. And of course, you can find him practically every day over at Comics Beat, writing about all things comics.
Hey everyone, this is Zach Quaintance, writer of the Death of Comics bookcase and reviews editor for Comics Beat, weighing in here with three of my favorite comics from 2024. First up, Godzilla Monsterpiece Theater by Tom Scioli. This is the type of book that reminds me why I love comics. It intermingles classic lines from The Great Gatsby with a Godzilla story, and then as it progresses, it sort of starts to incorporate more genre literary figures from the late 19th, early 20th century novels like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Dracula, and just no idea is too outrageous for this book. Scioli is clearly having a blast, and it really comes through to the reader. Also this year, I've really been enjoying The War, which is a serialized horror comic within Boom Studios' Hello Darkness anthology. This one's written by Garth Ennis, with art by Becky Cloonan, colors by Tamara Bonvillain, and letters by Pat Brosseau. This, to me, is just an absolutely terrifying series. It's sort of deeply human story that kind of makes you feel what a nuclear apocalypse might look like for you and your family. It's very grounded in a way that makes it relatable and just very scary. And then third, Plastic Man No More, the DC Comics Black Label series by Christopher Cantwell, Alex Linz and Jacob Edgar, colorist Marcelo Maiello, and letterer Becca Carey. This is a very dark, very weird, and sort of uncomfortable and interesting tragicomic ways book. It humanizes Plastic Man, who throughout most of his history has been played primarily for laughs, and just finds some really heartrending themes around morality, perceptions, and father trying to do what's best for his son within his limited ways that he knows how. And then last but certainly not least, I wanted to give a shout out to the Mad Cave Studios series Morning Star by writers D.B. Andre and Tim Daniel, artist Marco Finnegan, colorist Jason Wordy, and letterer Justin Birch. You know, this is a great family comic for adults with sci-fi touches, and just probably the thing that stands out the most in this book is absolutely phenomenal color work by Jason Wordy. If you're a comics craft sicko, you have to check it out for that alone, although the rest of the book is, of course, excellent as well. Anyway, thank you all so much for having me. And hey, here's to a new year of more excellent comics in 2025. Cheers.
Cheers to you, Zach. We love you so much. And also, you have proven yourself yet again as an individual of exquisite taste with your nomination of Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater. You will find out why in a moment.
Yeah, our next category is Best Adaptation of the Year. And I gotta say, some of my favorite comics in 2024 were adaptations. Matt Wagner and Kelly Jones doing Dracula. Not just doing Dracula, like they're taking Bram Stoker's story, but they're telling all the parts that weren't in Bram Stoker's story, because Dracula actually doesn't show up a lot in that book. So they found all those missing gaps and then they filled them in with their Dracula. Michael Walsh, his Frankenstein for Skybound.
So beautiful.
Best splash pages of the year.
So good.
That one is inspired by James Whale's original movie, but it then adds a whole bunch of detail that's missing from that flick. If you have not read that, you got to do so. It's the best version, or it's the best Universal Monsters adaptation that Skybound has done, and that's saying something because we've really loved, Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives, and James Tynion and Martin Simmons' Dracula, but Frankenstein, what Michael Walsh is doing there is like next level. But
neither of those are recipients of Best Adaptation.
No, Best Adaptation goes to the comic that Zach mentioned, Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater, which is a Godzilla story, but also it's an adaptation of The Great Gatsby.
I would say that it is 60% Gatsby, 40% Godzilla, which is a real sweet spot for me, because in high school I was like one of those kids who, whenever I did assigned reading, I'm like, this is the most brilliant book ever, Gatsby included. I read and reread The Great Gatsby, and we love Scholey's work. We love his point of view, especially when he comes from this place of deep knowing and understanding. I feel like what works so well in this book, what makes it so funny and yet so earnest, is how fluent Scholey is in both of these worlds.
Yes, and it's thrilling to read because it's coming from such a place of love. Also, look at how his art style has evolved in the last few years. Look at what he did with Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and I Am Stan, and see how that shifted, like his paneling and his coloring shifted, moved into Witchman, which Eric talked about at the start of this ceremony, and then exploded in Godzilla's Monster Piece Theater. I feel like he has found a new version of himself in this book, and it's like he's Mario from Super Mario Brothers, and he's just grabbed a mushroom and leveled up.
Yes, that's right.
The second issue just came out from IDW Publishing, and yeah, like all the other characters that he has invited into this story are really working for me.
He's a silly, silly man, and I love it.
And speaking of men who can be rather silly, Lisa, helping us introduce our next category is cartoonist Christian Ward, the man behind Batman City of Madness, which also concluded this year and got collected in a beautiful hardcover book, a Black Label Treasury-sized edition that belongs on your shelf.
Oh, yeah.
And right now he has Two-Face, the first issue, in stores, with the second issue coming out real soon. We got to read that, and it's even better than the first issue. So let's see what Christian is excited about in 2024.
Hello, this is Christian Ward of Batman City of Madness and Two-Face fame. I'm here on Comic Book Couples Counselling to talk about 3 books that I really enjoyed in 2024. Most comic book creators, we don't really have time to enjoy comics. We're too busy making our own. But 3 books that I really made the time for this year are Absolute Batman. I'm sure it'll come as no surprise to anyone that I absolutely adored what Scott and Nick did on that Absolute book, and it was really, really refreshing and an exciting take on Batman. Absolutely fantastic. Kind of felt like a create-your-own comic and a Batman comic all at the same time. And talking about create-your-own comics, probably my pick of the best create-your-own comic this year would be Patrick Hovarth's Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. A big favourite of Brad and Lisa's, I know, but just an utter surprise, and just every issue was just like I devoured it. It was the book of the week that I would always make time to read, and just absolutely wonderful. Just that beautiful mixture of Richard Scarry and horror. It was just so unexpected. But beyond that, it's the drama and the existentialism and just the utter unpredictable storytelling. We never knew what was going to happen from one issue to another, and I just, I think that's just real breathless comic making. And then finally, an unusual choice for me because I'm not much of a Marvel guy, but The Ultimates has just been a joy every month and a real pleasure to read, and been really, really good. I think what Dennis Camp does with The Ultimates is just like, I find it really inspiring as a kind of newbie writer, just the way he structures each issue. Just sort of like a real clear beginning of the issue is your question, and then the end of the issue is your answer. And it's just really exciting, just that each one has its own shape and feel. And that's so inspiring and exciting to sort of read, one as a fan and two as a writer who's always looking to get better. So, hats off to Dennis. It's just incredible stuff, and makes me excited and interested in the Ultimates, which is not really a line I've ever really been into, and obviously, again, you know, Hickman, of course, kind of heading the whole thing up. You know, you can't go wrong with Jonathan Hickman. My daughter's just walked in. Say hello, Flo.
Hello.
There you go. What was your favourite comic this year?
Me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
She doesn't know. Well, there you have it, folks. Bye now.
Thank you, Christian. We are so lucky to call you friend. Christian Ward is a person that we admire so much, not just as a writer and an artist, but as a tender of connections, where you establish a relationship with Christian, he maintains it in such a graceful and beautiful way, and we have been benefactors of it, and we thank him.
Yeah, and despite having to be glued to his board making comics for us to consume, he still finds time to explore what the medium is doing in the moment, and finding the gems, which he just highlighted there for us. And you know, hopefully he'll help Flo find some comics to really love in 2025.
Yeah.
Because we want to hear back from her next year during the Stampies.
But Christian, don't go anywhere, because we have to do our next category.
Yeah, we're not done buttering your bread. Our next category is Best Collaboration of the Year. There have been so many good ones. It's hard to like pull one over another, but this one was maybe the most surprising to Lisa and myself, and it is the collaboration between Christian Ward and James Tynion IV regarding the distillery book Spectrograph, which just wrapped up with its 4th issue this week. Spectrograph for me was this really strange emotional oddity. I mean, honestly, it was a little bit of a miracle of a book, right? Because it was ridiculously disturbing. It could be spooky, but it was also utterly beautiful. I think Christian was doing things with his paneling in Spectrograph that he had never quite done before.
It really celebrates that like oversized format.
Like the page turns in this book, the splashes in this book, they were very splashy. But the splash that I remember the most that sold me on the entire concept of Spectrograph comes in that first issue, when we learn that our hero has left her baby unattended in his high chair.
I hate that you're spoiling that. I know it's such a big part of this story, but like, dude, I was gutted.
I'm sorry. It's such, like, I call it the baby ticking time bomb.
Yes.
It creates a level of tension that I did not experience anywhere else in comics in 2024. And it carries it all the way to the 4th issue, which, again, just came out this week. Man, what great storytelling.
What makes this a great collaboration is that by these two brilliant people coming together, they both can showcase what they do best, and it elevates the medium. Where, like, you talked about the paneling, I think some of the design of some of the, I'll just call them creatures. I'm like, I don't want to spoil it, but Brad's already spoiled it.
I mean, like, Ghost Guts was, like, the thing they used to sell this book. There's so much Ghost Guts in this book.
It's trippy. Yeah. It's
cosmic.
It's visceral. It's, like everything. It's everything.
But at the end of the day, there is an emotional core like that you know, it's at the center of our two leads trapped in this house, and the book gives you relief and also denies you relief.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying.
It's satisfying. And I know that the word lesson is unsexy to most people, but to me, like, it is like being able to package the idea of like, hey, enjoy your life, enjoy what you have. You know, time is like, we're all living in a parallel universe to each other.
And don't let capitalism abandon your baby. So read Spectrograph. Excited for that hardcover book.
Mind your baby.
Anything like the Somna hardcover, you know, it's going to be a delicious totem. And for our next category, we have another great cameo, this time from Chris Piers of the hit YouTube show Comic Tropes. We got to meet Chris for the first time at New York Comic Con this year, and it was nice to see that he actually exists in the real world outside of my screen.
Yeah.
Hello, folks. This is Chris from Comic Tropes, and thank you very much to Brad and Lisa for inviting me to participate. So, I think we've been spoiled for choice when it comes to great comics in 2024. I think the reboots of things like Transformers, DC Absolute, Marvel Ultimate, even Ninja Turtles, you could say is sort of rebooted, they've been surprisingly strong. I think manga has had some real bangers this year, from Don Don to Asadora. There's been mind-blowing crime books, goosebump-raising horror. It's so hard to choose just one book to recommend. So, how dare you put me in this difficult position? Brad and Lisa, I'm so mad at you. No, in all seriousness, I'm going to select a book that I absolutely love, and I hope no one else on your show has selected just for variety's sake. My choice is The Last Mermaid by Derek Kirk Kim. This book is Derek's return to comics after a very successful decade in animation, and he used a lot of what he's learned there, I think, in both the visuals and the storytelling. This is a post-apocalyptic story where our world is now a desert wasteland. Think Mad Max. But what kind of a character would find such an environment even more dangerous than you and I? A mermaid. Our protagonist has a mech suit to cross the desert and hopefully find her people, but along the way, she has to deal with marauders, mutants, and the constant search for fresh, oxygenated water. The world reminds me of the best apocalyptic stories, like Fist of the North Star. The character is just always up against gigantic threats. But what makes it special is that it balances that with some of the most gorgeous artwork I have seen this year. The colors are sumptuous. They feed into the tone, the detail in the artwork. It's intricate and believable. The storytelling is quick and nimble. I think some folks may have stayed away from this book because it's a brand new idea, or the square dimensions also look new, and new is scary and bad and evil. But let me tell you, The Last Mermaid will transport you to another time and place. It is a whirlwind ride. I love it. I love the weird main character. I love her cute axolotl companion. I love the fight scenes. The Last Mermaid by Derek Kirk Kim gets my strong recommendation. Thanks again, Lisa and Brad. Appreciate getting invited. Thank you for all your positivity. Can't wait to hear what other people have for their choices.
Chris, I love this pick because it is one of those comics that Lisa and I didn't get around to in 2024, but it is one that we did buy and is currently sitting on our shelf. A nice square trade paperback, and Lisa and I are the types of people who like a different kind of format.
We love shapes.
So yeah, we're going to crack this one open in January and finally read it. If you are not subscribed to Chris's Comic Tropes YouTube page, you need to do so immediately. His show always dives deeply and thoughtfully into comics, and they cover a wide array of comics and also movies too.
Yeah.
He has a show with Jim Mahfood that is fantastic, exploring trash cinema, so seek them out. The Last Mermaid doesn't really have anything to do with our next category, but that's okay. It's our award show. We do what we want to do. Our next category is Best Short Story, and we have chosen Tri Wong's The Last Soldier of the Somme, which appears in The Strange Tales of Oscar Zahn, his webtoon, which was recently collected as a hardcover.
We became entirely smitten with Tri Wong when we read his Everyday Hero Machine Boy.
Oh man, I cried so much while reading that comic.
Insta marinara flavored tears with that book, and we swore to follow him everywhere and anywhere, and we then proved it by reading his Lego Ninjago Garmadon story, which is that was my entree into Ninjago.
Same.
I have not looked any deeper.
Same.
But I friggin' love that book.
It was a good comic.
And so when we finally got our mitts on this collection of short stories about Oscar Zahn, a ghost with a strange affliction, just trying to do good. We were just like so grateful to have another book from him.
Yeah, find the book at your local comic book store.
It's beautiful.
Open it up, and you will instantly recognize a little Mike Mignola. The book does sort of read like Hellboy Jr., but in the best way.
Yes.
But then it does stuff that Mike Mignola never would do. And The Last Soldier of the Somme is the first proper story of the Strange Tales of Oscar Zahn. There is a chapter that comes before it. But it is a ghost story. It is set during World War I, and maybe also not set during World War I. You know, it gets complicated with ghosts and maybe a little time travel there too. But there are panels in this tale that were instantly iconic to me. There are creatures, the design of which are very shiver-inducing, but there's so much sorrow in these creatures as well. And I think the reveal is obvious, but I also don't think it's meant to be a mystery. It's more about drawing out the horror of the Great War, how this entire generation of young men went off and died. And it is about the tragedy of that. But the book is also not without hope and love and warmth.
To me, I think this is an all ages book where it has violence, it has tragedy and grief.
Yeah.
But I think it has that kind of glow of optimism, and it's using these stories as like a stepping stone to living a more realized existence.
Yeah. And you know, World War I is such an evocative moment in history that has been played with a little bit in pop culture, but I would argue not nearly enough. And I don't think World War I has ever really been handled in the way that Tribe Wong handles it. I really do want to watch the Jean Genet film, A Very Long Engagement, now that I have just devoured this story. I feel like they definitely share some creative DNA, some emotional DNA. But yeah, so please seek out The Strange Tales of Oscar Zahn. The first hardcover is available now. I believe this story was originally published on Webtoons in 2019, but collected this year. And the great thing is you can go, after you've read all of this hardcover, go to Webtoons and continue reading Oscar Zahn stories. Of course, I'm assuming they'll be collected at some point in the near future in another hardcover.
We would love to see the two spines next to each other on the shelf.
Yeah, I would actually like to see Tribe Wong make even more
Yes,
Oscar
please.
Zahn comics, because it is a Hellboy character. He could make these stories for the rest of his life.
I want to follow Oscar Zahn's adventures forever. And speaking of adventures, we have David Brooke from Adventures in Poor Taste.
Yes, introducing our next category. We're coming down to our final two categories, folks.
Hey guys, David Brooke here. Love to contribute to Comic Couples Counseling's best of list every year. So you've probably heard my voice before. Check me out on AIPTcomics.com. I'm the co-owner. Also check out AIPT Comics podcast. But let's get to it. My favorite comic of the year has to be Ultimates. Okay, I am a superhero fan. Some of you may not be, but I think some of you who don't necessarily like superheroes could dig on this book. This is, of course, one of the new Ultimate books that launched this year as the Ultimate Universe went into full swing with Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Black Panther. This one of all those books, though, feels like the most important to the larger story as far as the maker and his return in, I think, 13 months, maybe when you hear this, 12 months from now. But Ultimates takes the cake for me, in part because it's reinventing all these classic characters, or in some cases, killing them off, or having them step down and new ones rise up, like we recently saw in Ultimates number 5 with Hawkeye. The series basically offers a fresh take on iconic Marvel characters. We've got a slightly different Captain America, where America doesn't exist anymore. We have a new Thor, we have a new Iron Man, although in this case he's going by Iron Lad. The writer Dennis Camp and artist Juan Ferjeri are doing an amazing job reimagining these heroes as part of a global resistance movement against the Makers' Council. And At the same time, they're sort of like a terrorist outfit. They're the rebellion, and we don't normally see the Avengers or the mainline hero team doing that. So there's a lot of political intrigue involved in that too. There's some really good storytelling devices as well. For example, in Ultimates number 4, there's multiple parallel timelines appearing on every page, and it's adding depth and complexity to the storyline. You know, this format keeps readers engaged by presenting a multi-layered plot. There's also emotional and dark character arcs. The series is exploring the tragic fall of Reed Richards into Doctor Doom. And at the same time, this is a version of Doctor Doom that we've seen before. So there are these through lines, not only with the maker, but also the fact that heroes are being told what they would be or what they could be thanks to the 616 universe. So there's this implication of, do I become the best me? Is this the best me? There's also some great art here. Juan Frigeri and Phil Noto jumped on board for one issue too. They're really enhancing the emotional weight of the story. It's just narratively so strong and offering a visual experience that complements the story. The first issue in particular had a lot of great imagery of scale. And the ability to change the status quo is another element why I like the Ultimate so much. Unlike the mainstream Marvel Universe, the Ultimate series allows for significant changes to the universe itself. There's this freedom that lets the creators take a bold risk, say, giving us a new Hawkeye, making every issue feel consequential and unpredictable. When we meet this universe's Hulk, for instance, or She-Hulk for that matter. All of these elements combine to make the new Ultimate series stand out, and it's really delivering a narrative that feels both refreshing and emotionally charged. It's a must-buy on-site book for me, and it's been in my top 2 quite a few times on the AIPT Comics podcast. And yeah, it just bowls me over with how good it is. So yeah, go check that out. Definitely going to be in a lot of top 10 lists at the end of the year. And thanks for listening, and thanks for listening to the Comic Couples Counseling Podcast. This is David Brooks signing off.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Nathan, also. They both host the AIPT podcast, which I listen to every Sunday. They were 2 of the first people to ever invite us onto their show.
Yeah.
Giving Comic Book Couples Counseling a little bit more legitimacy. So we'll always be grateful to them. I gotta say, Lisa, I'm starting to feel a little bad that we have not read the Ultimates.
Real sheepish.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to add that to our homework in the next couple of days before we put out our 50 best comics of 2024. It seems like if people are not celebrating the Ultimates, they're celebrating the Absolute Universe, which is why I put David's blurb there, because it's time for our favorite first issue of the year.
Pew, pew, pew.
And yes, for us, this category belongs to Absolute Batman. Scott Snyder and Nick Dragotta made a comic that can only be a comic. Yes, I'm sure we can all imagine what a movie adaptation of this would be, animated or live action, but once you do that and you remove Nick Dragotta's art from it, it's not the same thing. This is cartooning, and I feel like in 2024, DC Comics really embraced the visual side of comics and has been hiring stylists left and right and bringing Nick Dragotta into this comic with Scott Snyder was a brilliant move.
There are always so many Batman comics on the shelf, and we can give a little piece of our heart to each one.
I mean, there's been a great batch of Batman comics this year. Batman City of Madness concluded, Gargoyle of Gotham, Batman and Robin Year One from Chris Samnee and Mark Waid right now is exceptional. Zdarsky and Jimenez's Batman ongoing has been a lot of fun too. Detective Comics for Ram V. I mean, like, the list goes on and on. Like, we get a lot of Batman comics, but when they're this good, it's hard to be mad.
Yeah, well, like, it is because the established prism that Batman is, the symbol of, like, capitalism and vengeance. Like, no wonder so many good stories start with, like, Batman, right?
Yeah, right.
But I feel like taking the character of Batman and turning him one new direction that nobody thought Batman could really go, and letting, like, myself as a reader redefine who Bruce Wayne is as a person in my head. Like, my view of Batman is once again forever changed.
The second I saw that promotional image of, like, you know, the beefcake Batman, Nick Dragata's Batman, I was in love. I was sold. I was not necessarily sold on the idea of, like, what if Batman but no money, right? Then you read that first issue and it's that. Like, that is part of the idea going into the Absolute Universe with Bruce Wayne, putting him in a different social class and having him become Batman through other means than just, like, endless wealth. But beyond that, there's so much else going on. The slight alteration to the origin story. This first arc is called The Zoo, and in the first issue, we get just glimpses of what happened to Bruce Wayne and his father at the zoo. That change, one, yes, made it relatable to 2024. It is a fear that I don't think was necessarily there in 1938, 1939, when the character was created. And our relationship with the handgun was definitely different in 1939 than it is in 2024. But then here we go in this first issue with this splash page, this extreme close-up of the pistol at the zoo. It is so scary. It is so scary and so effective. And you carry that splash page with you throughout the rest of the issue and every issue that we've read since.
For me, the mind-blowing accomplishment of Absolute Batman #1 is that they could change all of these things about Bruce's life, right? The circumstances of his parents dying, his monetary circumstances, his resources, his
with
friendships.
the rogues.
That's right. Like, you could change all of these things and not make Bruce feel like a stranger to me. He very much still feels like the same person in a different circumstance, which I think is just so cool because it makes you then reflect upon yourself and go, like, well, what parts of me would be the same person if my circumstances were to change?
Yeah. It's insane that you can take a character that has been around for so long and then tweak it just a little bit and then inject all this new attention toward him.
Yes.
It's been thrilling to see. I love the reception of Absolute Batman.
I love the conversation of Absolute Batman.
And I love what is following in Absolute Batman's wake with Absolute Wonder Woman and Absolute Superman and Absolute Martian Manhunter next year with the Ultimates as Denny's Camp and Javier Rodriguez, Absolute Flash. Like, DC giving permission to these creators to bend them to the breaking point so that we can better understand what we love about them in the first place is thrilling. And then doing it with such stylists like Nick Dragata, Hayden Sherman, Javier Rodriguez. This is comics. This is comics. And this is the energy that I want to see from Marvel. I wish Marvel would chase cartoonists, chase stylists the way that DC seems to be doing these days.
Listeners, you've probably already read it if you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
So this is a celebration more than a recommendation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's been a really wonderful, as Eric said it again at the start of the show, it's bringing people into the shops, people who haven't been there in a while, people who have never been there before. It's wonderful when the medium has a moment like this.
Yeah, feat. It's a feat.
Okay, we gotta move into the conclusion of this episode. Helping us introduce the final category of part 1 is Troy Jeffrey Allen of Rexco Comics Studio.
Last year I recommended the slice of life comedy How I Became a Shoplifter. This year I have the perfect companion piece. It's called Grommets, and it's by writer Rick Remender, writer-comedian Brian Posehn, and artist Brett Parson. It's 1984, and like all great stories, two teenage rejects have just become friends. They immediately bond over Rush, posers, douche canoes, arcade games, and skateboarding. The last one is the spine of the 7-part miniseries. See, the name Grommets actually comes from skateboard culture and extreme sports, which is really what this book is about. A moment in time in subculture. Posehn and Remender are not shy about being self-inserts in this story. This book is meant to encapsulate and dramatize their teenage years, and they want to invite you along for the ride. This is the stuff I find really fascinating, right? If pop culture is going to allow us to gauge mainstream tastes of the time, then examining subcultures helps us fully document history, right? And that's what they're doing here. This is my kind of slice of life because of that. It's tales of shoplifting, it's tales of arcades and being pursued by mall security, teenage crushes, contact highs, and more skateboarding. But also, it's also about the secrets that kids keep because of the adult world. And more skateboarding. Frederick Wortham and Nancy Reagan would have hated this, but anyone who's ever been a disaffected youth will love it. Grommets is available now from Image Comics and Giant Generator. Play catch up before issue 7 drops this February. Thank you.
I have not thought of the phrase douche canoe in so long, and now it will be rattling in the forefront of my mind.
Bring it back, Lisa.
No, thank you. It belongs back there.
Troy Jeffrey Allen, thank you so much for this recommendation. We will have to be playing catch up. We missed Grommets, but I love the concept, and I love the idea of Rick Remender and Brian Posehn inserting themselves into this story. I'm super curious about it. And I love Troy being the final guest on this episode, recommending a comic that neither of us have read because it does speak to the absolute feast that 2024 has been for comics.
We have yet to taste everything.
But we're going to try. We're
yeah.
going to try to eat it all. Our final category of part 1 of the Stampies is best single issue. Not best first issue, but the best little pamphlet that we feel came out in 2024. I love selecting this book, especially for this category. It is a comic that has been around for years, decades actually. 2024 was its 40th anniversary, and yet the book feels as fresh as it ever has. And this particular storyline that this single issue appears in, I feel like is one of the best stories from its epic run.
We have to say it. Just say it.
I love teasing it out. It's issue 3 of Usagi Yojimbo, The Crow.
Yes. You know we're huge Stan Sakai stans. We love Usagi Yojimbo.
Yeah.
But this issue in particular has literally every single thing you love about an Usagi Yojimbo story. It has funny and fascinating side characters. It has a menacing villain. It's got some old friends. Gen is there. Yukichi is there. And it also brings back a character from 12 years ago. And it's just so astonishing to me. And of course it has the rad fighting. The art is better than ever. The visual storytelling is better than ever. It's just, I hope this Stan Sakai's ink never runs dry.
Yeah, like, you know, I think Usagi Yojimbo is a series that has a massive following, and we will read Stan Sakai till the end of time. But I also think it is a series, because it has been going on for decades, that new readers, even though every issue of Usagi Yojimbo could be your first issue easily, they're designed that way. New readers don't necessarily gravitate towards it because of that back catalog. But again, at Comic Book Couples Counseling, we are begging you to pick up the series now that it's being published again at Dark Horse Comics and just dive in.
We were you. It's not like we've been reading it since 1984.
Like, the pandemic is when we finally committed to Usagi Yojimbo, and it really has changed our lives. This character of Miyamoto Usagi is obviously in conversation with the classic samurai works, Musashi, you know, Book of the Five Rings, also all the classic Akira Kurosawa stories. But it's Stan Sakai's Hellboy. He can really tell any kind of story in feudal Japan through the eyes of Miyamoto. And that includes every kind of genre, every kind of tone. We have horror, we have comedy, we have supernatural.
We have romance.
We have true crime, we have deep dives into mythology, and we have romance. And The Crow also kind of has all those little things too, or suggests all of those little things too. But for me, why I loved 3 over all other issues that came out in 2024 is its start. After 2 issues of following Gen and Stray Dog and Miyamoto and Yukichi, we leave to follow 2 porters who are assigned to a merchant's convoy, and they're really concerned because there is a bandit, the Crow, attacking and killing travelers. And the book spends a lot of time with this convoy, with these 2 people, and they clearly love each other. And of course, the Crow descends upon them, starts slaughtering all the guards around the merchant convoy, and they know that they are going to be next. They are about to die. And so they start like expressing their love for each other, and they confess their sins like, oh, you know what? I stole from you not too long ago. I hope you can forgive me. And the other one's like, yeah, well, I slept with your wife. And he's like, what? You slept with my wife? And then they start attacking each other in the middle of this bloodshed. And I won't spoil the ending of their confrontation, but the fact that Stan Sakai took all this page space away from the main Crow story to tell this little moment, man, that's good storytelling.
It's so good. And like, it is amazing how long Stan Sakai has been sustaining the idea of Usagi Yojimbo. Like, as a person who cannot carry a thought from the morning to the mid-morning.
Yeah.
The idea that he keeps feeding and fostering and nurturing Usagi Yojimbo, it really makes the character alive to me.
Yeah, and, you know, the fact that he can reference and reintroduce this character from A Town Called Hell, the storyline that came out in 2012, and bring him back when probably none of his readers were really concerned about him, and then give that character a conclusion that is satisfying in service of yet another character, Stray Dog and Yukichi. The canvas is large.
Yeah.
You know, I would love to see what Stan Sakai's mind map looks like regarding where these characters are going and how long it's going to take him to get there. Like, it's a leisurely pace, and I'm sure it's filled with a lot of surprise, and he's not even sure himself, but every turn feels like that was the turn that was meant to be. And then finally, the last thing I want to say is that after issue 3, when we get to 4 and 5, Stan shows a side of Miyamoto Usagi that I had not seen in a while, the violent side of the character. And the last issue has an ending note that is beautiful, but tinged with pain, and does fall under the umbrella of Comics Will Mend Your Heart. And yet, surrounding that, just minutes before, there's a decapitation that is super gnarly, and like gnarly in the way that only Stan can do. It is absolutely cartoony, and I still think you could give this book to any kid and they would enjoy it. But there's a grimness to a particular death in the final issue of the Crow that's also just like nobody. Like, it's not like a significant character. It's just like, that guy's gone.
Yeah.
And the way he's dispatched is like, wow, whoa, Stan can still shock me.
These comics are going to be collected. The trade is coming out in January. If you have not read Usagi Yojimbo, I beg of you, start here.
We're on our knees. Please join the fandom around Usagi Yojimbo.
You'll thank us. You will.
Yeah. You know, Dark Horse has put out Ice and Snow. That's in trade paperback. You can pick that up. And then the Crow's coming out, and like, they're nice little collections. Go to Stan Sakai's website, get one with a remark on it. You won't be disappointed.
Yay, we did it. Part 1 in the can. Everybody take a stretch break.
Yeah.
Because coming next week is the Stampies Part 2.
That's right. Next Friday, we are going to be doing this all over again, but with new categories and new guests. We will do Writer of the Year, Artist of the Year, Best All Ages, Best Young Adult, Best Limited Series, Best Ongoing, Best Original Graphic Novel, and of course, the Jesse Tapia 2 Tribute Champ Stamp that we've been doing for the last 2 years since we lost Jesse. And this time we have an acceptance speech from the creator who gets that award.
Yeah, our first acceptance speech.
Yeah, that's right. And we hope if you've made it to this point in the Stampies Part 1, you will join us for Part 2. And if this is your first time listening to Comic Book Couples Counseling, please go back and take a look at our back catalog. We're always talking to rad creators like Vita Ayala and Skylar Patridge, talking about Finders Keepers. And we've recorded a bunch of conversations already for next year. Chip Zdarsky and David Brothers will be kicking things off in 2025, talking about their distillery comic, Time Waits.
We want to thank everyone who has ordered shirts or mugs or whatever you got from our TeePublic shop. We have 2 weeks left on our offer. All of our proceeds are going directly to the Trevor Project, so it's a great way to support a good cause and rep the show, which is super sweet. tpublic.com/stores/comic book couples counseling, separated by hyphens. Also, our comic book holiday gift guide is still evolving and changing and is still up, so check it out if you haven't looked in a while. And we have another screening coming up with Film Club at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia, co-sponsored by Four Color Fantasies. It is, this is an announcement.
It is. Let's announce it, Lisa.
Drumroll, please.
This is how you kick off 2025 with Film Club.
Speed Racer.
Speed Racer, the Wachowskis classic. This is the great comic book movie of 2008. I know you thought it was The Dark Knight, or maybe you thought it was Iron Man. No, it was Speed Racer. It bombed back in the day, but I'm here to tell you that it is one of the great comic book movies, if it's not the great comic book movie.
It slaps.
And you gotta see it on the big screen.
Yes.
Join us in Winchester on the 26th of January at a new hour, 5 o'clock. We used to be at 4 o'clock. We're pushing it 1 hour later. Hopefully more people can attend these screenings.
Okay, Brad, I think it's about time for a costume change. What beautiful gown am I going to be wearing for our next installment of our audio podcast? Where can our listeners send the words of affirmation to you?
I'll be recording it bottomless. That is a promise. And you can find me on most social medias at MouthDork. Of course, I'm spending most of my time on Blue Sky these days. If you have words of affirmation for our logos, send them to Jesse Lonergan at Jesse Lonergan on Blue Sky, or on Instagram, Jesse.Lonergan. Lisa, where can our listeners send the words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on some social medias. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you choose. We're everywhere. If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes. And we're also giving all of the proceeds from November and December of our Patreon to the Trevor Project as well.
Yeah, that's going to feel real good to donate that money. And we are kicking off in January Married to Singles again, where we're talking to creators about their favorite single issues. We've already recorded a conversation with Tyler Crook all about Mage, the Hero Discovered #6. And that will appear exclusively on our Patreon feed. If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on all the socials at CBCC Podcast.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Audible or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to do an active service, why not write a review of the show or leave a comment while you're there?
Yes, please.
We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open.
Doopy doopy.
I am so dizzy. I have such a crazy migraine.
I'm so sorry, sweetheart.
I hope I didn't sound utterly insane during that episode.
I didn't think you acted any differently.
Okay, well, that's comforting.